I think we're up to Daf Tes Omid Base as sent out in the sheets on the attachment. Thank you, Peter. Daf Tes, and you've got the posuk as well, which we'll need. So this is a bit, just get back into it. If you remember, you've got a posuk on the side of your Gemara, as I do. In fact, I've got a chumash in front of me, so I've got the full context as well. This is the beginning of Parshas Bahar, where it talks first of all about Shemitah year, and then it talks about the Sofar To'alecha. You should count, of course, that's where the word Jubilee comes from. Interesting, remember we have the Queen's Silver Jubilee and other interesting silver. Jubilee is actually 49, going to 50. But counting 7 sets of 7. And then after that, you'll have the 49th year. And before we get to those psukim in between, it says that then, in fact, the 49th year, or the 50th year, is also an equivalent to a Shemitah year. But there's some other halachas that apply to it, which ensure it actually is this Yovel year. Hold on a minute, I'll turn this on. Right, kettle making a bit of noise there. There are 2 psukim in between which are crucial. Before we get to this Jubilee year, remember the 50th, and we spoke about the 50th, whether it's 50, also number 1 as well, but it's the Jubilee year. Good, Michael, good to see you. We're talking about the Jubilee year, and then we have Posuk Tes and Yud. You've got one Posuk, we've got one Posuk written around the side, but there are 2 Psukim which are relevant to us. And the first one is, you should blow the shofar. We've spoken about that, remember, on the Yom Kippur of that 50th year, you blow the shofar, and then you sanctify the 50th year, and you call it Duror. Duror meaning, sorry about that, hold on a minute. Right, getting a bit noisy here. So sanctifying the 50th year, and you call it Duror. Remember this word Duror? Well, in fact, the Gemara will pick this up. Where does the root come from? Duror, interesting word. And in fact, we'll find out it does come from the word Dira. Dira meaning a place to live, which means Duror, you're free to live where you like. And this is referring to the slaves who are free and free to live wherever they like. And then it says, Yovel He, it is this Yovel. Well, we know we've spoken about it being the Yovel year. I don't know why it suddenly mentions Yovel He. We'll see about that in a moment, those 2 crucial words. And what else? V'shavtem ish el achuzosoi. The ish el mishpachtoi toshuvu. Meaning that land goes back to its original, where it was all divided up, the original division of land amongst the tribes, it goes back. So as we explained before, you're selling land actually only as a leasehold. You can't get a freehold because it will ultimately go back. And this is when this happens. So we've had 3 things mentioned here. Number 1, the shofar being blown. Then it says you got freedom to live wherever you like. That's the servants. Everybody is not bound by their master, ukros and Duror. Then it says Yovel He, it is Yovel. And then it finishes up by saying, V'shavtem ish el achuzosoi. Every person goes back to their original, almost like inheritance, but it means their place that have taken hold of, their achuzah, le'echos, to take hold of the land that they've originally taken hold of. The ish el mishpachto, everybody goes back. So they're living, hopefully they're happy to do that, to go back to live next to their cousins, and hopefully there's no, but that's a good point. People are being forced to make sure they are happy with the families, because it's going to be really literally happy families, or so we hope, because every person's going back el mishpachto. They'll now be living back with their cousins and second cousins, etc., tribe of Shimon, Reuben, whichever tribe it was, they would all be living together. So as I say, there are three things: shofar, servants going back. Then we have those crucial words, Yovel He, it is Jubilee year. Don't really need those words. Then the final halacha, which is land going back to the original owners. And then following that, of course, we said before, in fact, it's also a Shemitah year in its own right, which means the land is fallow, there's no cultivating going on, harvesting, etc., plowing, growing, sowing, etc. Okay, now we pick this up again in the Gemara. So the Gemara says, Tona Rabbanon, right at the top, Yovel He. What are those two words, Yovel He, doing? So we explained, Afal Pi, even though, Shelo Shomtu. What's Shelo Shomtu? Shemitah normally means taking hold of or loosening one's hold is Shemitah. Even though Shelo Shomtu, even if that did not happen, what does that mean? That the land did not go back to its original owner. It's meant to be whoever's actually living or owning that, thinking they own that land, they're meant to be shomtu. This lashon shomtu here, not to get confused with shemitah, which means shemitah of the land. This means shemitah, your hold on the land is gone. That's one of the halachas, if you remember. Remember, the land goes back to its original owner. Says the Quran, even if that didn't happen. Even if they did not blow the shofar, which was item number 1 mentioned in the psukim, it doesn't matter. It is still going to be a jubilee year with all the halachas that apply to cultivating and harvesting the land. Says the Gemara, Yochel, I might have thought, Af api shelo sholchu. What about the second halacha, which was sending away servants, the freedom of where you live? Talmud lo mahi. So you've got the word yovel, saying this is a yovel year, whether you like it or not. But he says, no, it. So we've got these two words together, one, an inclusive word, meaning that it will be called a jubilee year with all the halachas of the ground. Whether or not these halachas, these extra 3 halachas that we're talking about, which are particularly relevant to Yovel, apply. But then we have the word he saying, no, it's a known. So the he seems to be pinpointing and saying he, it, one of those 3 is crucial. And the halacha, as we've just seen here, these are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. The crucial one, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is sending away servants. The servants must be released. If that has not happened, if no one has released their servants, then this will not be a Shemitah year. Amazing halacha. So in fact, it's almost like within our hands to allow it to be a Jubilee year. That is the view according to Rabbi Yehuda. So again, out of the 3, the crucial one for it to be the Jubilee year is in fact sending away the servants. Let's have another quick look at that top Rashi.
Does that have to be 100%?
Well, that's a very good question. A lot of the poskim talk about this when it's a minchas chinuch, the Aruch Laner, the Sfas Emes. They all talk about what number do you need when we talk about servants. Everybody, 1. The conclusion, it's interesting. It's rare, you rarely see this, that as they all conclude with this tzorich, which means it needs to be looked into. Which means the earlier poskim have not actually concluded which way it is. If you look, for example, in the Sefer called Sefer HaChinuch, which talks about the Yovel year, it doesn't specify how many people, for example, in particular when you're talking about the servants, the conclusion of the Sfas Emes, as long as there's one person who is keeping this mitzvah, then it will be a Jubilee year. That's what we're saying. But watch that point. Very good question as we go through the Gemara, because you'll see from Rashi, it looks as if as long as there's one person who's performing that mitzvah of releasing the servants, that will be sufficient to get the tick, as it were, and it will be called the Jubilee year with the halachas of the Jubilee year. But let's have a look.
Norman, but the pasuk seems to be addressing each person, doesn't it? It's like
absolutely. You're right. Every person.
So therefore, there's no half a many. Just so the half. I understand David's question. You wouldn't say just one field has to be.
No. What David's
or just one property. You know, everybody has a duty to do it, just like to keep Shabbos or whatever. You wouldn't. Yes,
absolutely. Let me explain David's question, and David will correct me if I'm explaining it wrongly.
This is the Perush. This is the Perush.
Is there Perush? Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
It's called Perush.
Yeah.
It's called the Perush David.
Perush David HaKohen.
Perush David HaKohen. Very good. Thank you very much. On the Perush David HaKohen, written around the side. Written around the side of the computer. Peter will send it on to us. The Pirush David HaKohen, when we the attachment. David's question is this: you're absolutely right, Mervyn. Yes, the pasuk does say every person should be there. As we say, what was the pasuk? Korosem doror boris achol yoshevel. Absolutely. We are looking at this word where it says yovel he. It is yovel, which means what is crucial. And will therefore mean that the last part, which is talking about this Jubilee year with all the Kedusha So'oretz, what enables it to get this Kedusha So'oretz? One person freeing the servant. That doesn't mean that everybody else doesn't have to do it, but it just means to be able to qualify, as it were, to be the Jubilee year with those halachos of the Jubilee year and the Kedusha So'oretz, one person has to say release. Now, there are other halachas which have to apply as well. For example, the land, giving back the land. Of course, that's a mitzvah. It's said, "V'shavtem isha lachuzasei." But if people do not do that, that does not disqualify the land from having its kedusha so'oretz. You with me? So yes, there's a mitzvah. Every person must release servants, release their land, and give it back. But Yovel, he was saying one is crucial that it would give the Kedusha So'oretz. Which one is it according to Rabbi Yehuda? The crucial mitzvah according to Rabbi Yehuda is the mitzvah of releasing servants. And what we seem to be saying is as long as there's one person who's done that, that will give it the Kedusha of the land. That is the view.
Historically, are we talking historically about times when observance of certain laws, including Yalvel, was quite patchy?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. There were times when in the Shemitah itself, I think we spoke about this last time, Shemitah itself was patchy. Although here we're saying something rather different. Here we're saying there will not be the Kedusha So'oretz unless these halachos are carried out. In fact, in the end, we're saying one of them is crucial. Otherwise, there won't be a Shemitah. There is no Yovel year unless someone is releasing the servants. You're right. Of course, everybody should be doing that. Everybody should be giving the land back. The shofar should be blown. But if that does not take place, it does not affect the Kedusha So'oretz, other than according to Rabbi Yehuda, the crucial one is sending away, we've said here, the servants. Sammy's got a question.
Yeah, I just want to say, although the Shemitah is not mentioned in that sentence.
You are very good.
But the liberty is the liberty of the slaves. So I would have thought that would be the one.
You're quite right. Very good. The Gemara will have to follow that through. I think we spoke about this a little bit last week. How do you see which is the crucial one? And in answer to your question, Sammy, it's the next pasuk which tells me there are three halachas, and then it talks about the Kedusha So'oretz, the Shemitah So'oretz. So one of those is, we're learning from this word Yovel, he is crucial, giving it that Kedusha for the land, which means the land must be fallow. Why is it that, Sammy, in answer to your question, the Gemara will ask exactly that? If you have 1 in 3, you've got a 33, as we know, percentage, but 1 in 3 chance. Why is it that it's sending away the servants, which is crucial? And that's, I think, your question, Sammy. Why should it be that one rather than the land going back? Or you could ask, what about the shofar? Have a look.
Who blows the shofar?
Well, it's blown throughout the land, but in particular, it's Bezdin. And we'll see that again.
You see, you can see the reluctance of people to free their slaves. I mean, you know, they
Yes.
don't. But Skatim, I mean, that's a strange one because it's going to happen. That's commanded. Bezdin will blow the shofar.
Right.
It's unlucky to be a situation where the shofar will not be blown.
Very good. The Gemara will actually pick up on that logic. And for that reason, maybe that's why that should be the crucial one. Very good. Continue the Gemara.
It doesn't need to be the crucial one because it's unlikely to happen.
Yes, but according to the way we've learned now, according to Rabbi Yehuda, whether or not that shofar is blown is not the crucial one.
No, I can see that, but
look at Rabbi Yossi. You're obviously a Rabbi Yossi man. Continue the Gemara. Rashi will just point out those 3 psukim, which I've seen and you've seen too. And very important, we remember the order of the 3 extra halachas for the Jubilee, which are the first one we haven't got in the pasuk, which is Talviru shofar b'chol artzachem, blowing the shofar. Number 2, we have freedom of servants, slaves are free. Then we have those crucial words, Yovel He, it is Yovel. One of them is crucial. And then following that, we've got that pasuk on top. V'shavtem ishel achuzos, land going back. So again, just mention it once again, shofar, servants, those 2 words, Yovel He, and then, as we say, the land going back, as we called it, also another type of shmita of the land. It's losing one hold on the land, v'shavtem el achuzos. So, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the crucial one is the second one, which immediately precedes those words, Yovel He, which may be a bit of a clue why that is the crucial one. You with me? Immediately preceding those words, it says, Ukrosim deror ba'oretz echol yoshvel, freedom of movement, Yovel He, tiyelochem. Okay, you've got the pasuk there. Now look at Rabbi Yossi, 4 lines down. Rabbi Yossi Omeno, Yovel He, I agree with you. 2 out of the 3 are a mitzvah, should be performed, must be performed, but they are not the crucial one to ensure there will be kedusha so'oretz. Says, have you got it 4 lines down? Yovel He afa pi shelo shomtu. Even if you haven't lost your grip on the land, which was item number 3, afa pi shelo sholchu, even though they haven't sent away the servants, which was item number 2, Yochel apal pi shelo toko. I might have thought, this is Simon's point, I might have thought, what about the shofar too? Maybe that's not, yes, it's a mitzvah, it should be done, but it's not the qualifying mitzvah which ensures the land will get its kedusha, or it's no, Talmud lo mahi, it's saying there's one of these 3 is crucial. So according to Rabbi Yossi, and I think we mentioned this also last week, Rabbi Yossi is saying it is item Yochel Afa Pishalo Toku Tamalo Mahi. It's the shofar which is the crucial one. So again, shofar mentioned first. Then we talk about the slaves. Then we've got Yovel He. Then we've got land going back. That word He goes back to the right at the beginning of this parsha, which is talking about blowing the shofar. If the shofar is not blown on that Yom Kippur, then we will say the land does not have kedusha of the kedusha like a normal Shemitah year. Now, this is the point. The Gemara now is going to pick up exactly this.
Norman, are you saying that if none of these happen,
yes,
there isn't a Yovel?
Correct. What do you mean there isn't a Yovel? It
What
means
does
the
that
land, the rule about Lo Sizra'u will not apply. You can actually sow the field. So you're right, there's a bit of a let out there, isn't there?
It's almost like a heter. We're saying
Yes, yes, yes.
let's not. We don't want to have the problem of Yovel. So if we do none of these things, we won't have any of the halachas of Yovel.
But as we explained before, it looks like, certainly the way the Sfas Emes and others are concluding, as long as one person, whichever one of your crucial ones it is, as long as someone's done it, that's enough to click, and there will be Kedushas Ha'aretz. So we'll watch we'll just see how this develops.
And then if you don't, so what does that mean, Kedushas Ha'aretz?
It means you could sow the field. As you in a normal 7th year Shemitah year, which, as we mentioned last week, is next year, or next year it will be the Shemitah year, where there's Kedushas Ha'aretz, whether we like it or not. However, when it comes to Yovel, it does seem to be dependent on, well, as we've said, at the moment, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, one of these 3 extra halachas taking place. Which one it should be is the question the Gemara now poses. Says the Gemara, yes, Malcolm.
What happens if they don't have a chauffeur?
Have a look.
Sorry,
are you telling?
Stupid question. Sorry.
No, it's a very good question.
I mean, let's say they really wanted to do it, but they just don't happen to have one.
And you're telling me there's no chauffeur in the whole land of Israel?
Well,
yeah, okay, fine. You could say that if there was no
the intention
chauffeur.
is there.
No, absolutely, very good point. And according to this Gemara, according to Rabbi Yossi, who says the crucial one is the shofar, that's presumably who you're asking according to, Yovel would not take place.
Well, if you don't have a chauffeur in Rosh Hashanah, you can't do Tkiyas Shofar. I mean, you might have the intention, but it doesn't help you very much, does it?
No, but he was saying even more than that. If you haven't got the shofar, it actually will not become a Jubilee year.
Yes, that's right. So what Malcolm was saying, if you haven't got a shofar, maybe it's all right, because if you didn't have a shofar, you wanted to blow the shofar. In fact, no, it doesn't.
Yeah, quite right. Wonderful. Intentions are great. And there's certainly schar, if you like, for one intends to go to shul, but sadly one can't. That's why it's so important. We all intended to go to shul before all of this whole the virus, etc. Because then at least we can say, hopefully, that we all have the machshava. We'd love to be in shul. So as long as we've got that before, yeah, you're quite right. But I mean, you're both right. Intentions are great, but it's not quite the same as actually blowing.
If it's not a Yovel year, if a particular year which should be a Yovel is not, what happens then? I mean, you have to wait another 50 years before the chance comes round again.
Yeah, and you do. Only for the Kedushas Ha'aretz. There's still this mitzvah. You should do the other, and as Mervyn mentioned, those mitzvahs are meant to be done. But it's only saying about the Kedushas Ha'aretz depend on, according to the shofar being blown, or according to Rabbi Yehuda, what's crucial is servants being freed. As long as servants have been freed.
Let me get them. I was going to look for.
Isn't it more that if you can't perform these 3 mitzvot, then the Jubilee year isn't cancelled? It's just that all the rest of the mitzvot are associated.
Yeah. Very, very good point. Absolutely, you're right. The extra mitzvahs linked to the land and the kedushas, and as I say, cultivating, harvesting, sowing, ploughing, that you're quite right. But yes, it will still be a Jubilee year. Yeah, you can call it the Jubilee year, and you'll have to wait for 50 years for the next one. It will be for the next 50 years. But yes, absolutely. But those mitzvahs are to be performed.
So it's not really a punishment.
No.
If you don't comply, the punishment is that you're allowed to sow your land.
Yeah, but there's something very. Sadly, we've in some ways, I wouldn't say lost the plot, but there was something very special about having food with kedushas shvius, and it's eaten with special kedusha.
There is punishment for it, because we say in Perek, don't we say but Suris Teva comes but there's all sorts of
Yeah, they absolutely. They're always,
Thanks.
you're right, knock-on effects. Absolutely. So the kedusha in those days, sadly, we're so far removed. But in those days when there was this kedusha so'oretz and people were eating, it was a tremendous spiritual lift for everybody. You're eating this very special, special food. It's kedusha shvius. Sorry, you won't have it this time. You'll have to wait 50 years to have it again. So it's very special, and the effect it would have to the Klal Yisrael, and the extra help it would give them spiritually, and the extra, these knock-on effects. So that would be lost.
Oh, I don't understand what you mean about the food, because I thought you said the effect was that there would be no zroa.
Yes, you see, yeah, it's very nice. Yes. We often look for heterim, as we've seen. Yeah, we know about heter, and financially, etc. Economically, it's very difficult. Shemitah year, extremely difficult. However, there is something very special about the crops that come from Shemitah year. Eating of those crops was a great spiritual lift. So I'm sorry, but what we'll say is this: I'm sorry, there's no extra spiritual advantage, as it were, of having the Shemitah year, because it's not a Shemitah year. See, we're tending to look as trying to avoid these extra hardships, and economically extremely difficult. And that's why it was very important. They were looking for ways to try and bypass it in the times where it was, economically very, very difficult. However, those people who were keeping this mitzvah, it was something very special, akin to a Shabbos. Yeah, it's very difficult Shabbos, never on Saturdays, they say, yeah, it's 6 or rather 7 days, looks like 6 out of 7 days income, but you can't compare to the Shabbos, besides the Isurim about working on Shabbos, etc. It's that spiritual uplift of a Shabbos, which people would have. So it's a spiritual uplift of this Jubilee year, which they would not have.
Could you please go through how the logic, how Rabbi Yossi comes to his conclusion that the shofar is the most crucial?
That's a very good point. You've asked the question. The Gemara now exactly asks your question. Have a look at the Gemara. 3, 4, 5. Absolutely. Every person. I thank you for asking that question. That's exactly, if you like, the Gemara's question. So yes, you're a bit of a trailer, as the old days. Here we are. Look at you. These are your words, Sammy. In other words, we've got the word yovel, which says they're all got to be done. But then we've got another posset, this he, which reduces for what's considered crucial here, is one of them, 1 out of 3. I think Malcolm may have asked this question last week. Why is it that, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the crucial one is the servants? Why is it, according to Rabbi Yossi, the crucial one is the shofar? And in fact, there's a third question. How come there is no one, I think this was Malcolm's question, how comes no one saying that the crucial one is actually the land? Taking possession of the land or giving the land back to the original owners. What is going on? Okay, so back again to the Gemara. Beginning of the line, well, let's focus. This often happens in the Gemara. You have view A, view B, and as we just mentioned view B, let's clarify view B before we clarify view A. You with me? Yeah, you're talking about view A, which was Rabbi Yehuda. You then have Rabbi Yossi's view. As we're talking about Rabbi Yossi, let's clarify Rabbi Yossi. We'll come back to Rabbi Yehuda. We haven't forgotten you, Rabbi Yehuda. How can we forget you? We will come back to you, but we will analyze first, in answer to your question, Sammy, why is it, according to Rabbi Yossi, that the crucial mitzvah is blowing the shofar? Is that right? Yes. Says the Gemara, Alfalpi, even though Shelo Sholchu, they didn't send away, doesn't matter, even if they hadn't sent away, sholchu, which means they haven't sent away the servants, for ein yovel elohim kein toku. The crucial one is blowing the shofar. Why? And this goes back really to your point, Simon. Lefi she'efsha, well, not quite, but we'll get to it in a minute. She'efsha la'olam below shiluach avodim. It could happen. Maybe the chances, very small indeed, but it could happen. They're actually at the point of Yovel, there were no servants. Maybe they'd been freed. As we explained before, servants lasting up to 50 years was rare in itself. It's only when the servant wants to stay on. Normally they'd be freed anyway.
Well, people just refuse. I mean, if people stick their heels in and say, we're not releasing them.
No, the other way around. What happens if you what happens at the point of Yovel, there are no servants? What happens if there are no servants? Says the Gemara, that's why. Because it could happen, it potentially could happen, there were no servants to release. If you're telling me...
What I'm saying, it could potentially happen that there are servants to be released, but
that's another one. That's another. That's absolutely right.
They're saying they go up, there's no shofar. I mean, it's nonsense.
Well, that's the point he's making. It's how la'olam. It's possible la'olam below shiluach avodim. It's possible there were no servants to release. If you're telling me the most crucial one is releasing the servants, you cannot make something dependent upon something where there's a possibility that mitzvah may not be possible to do. You can't have that.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it's dependent on there being avadim to release. But if there are no avadim to release, then it doesn't apply as a factor. But
you're quite right. There's no mitzvah to perform. But if the posuk saying yovel he, it is only a yovel, and we're translating according to Rabbi Yossi, if you released servants, and we say according to one people, maybe some people, if you've just released maybe one, as long as a servant has been released, then the click comes in, and the year is the Jubilee year. Now, it's possible potentially, you're quite right, there are no servants to release, which means there's no mitzvah, but how can you make something dependent upon something which might not happen? If you had to choose between and one, have a look, continue the Gemara. It's impossible. You're bound to be able to find an animal and get yourself a shofar and blow the shofar. But it's possible you could have a year at Yovel where that, for whatever reason it is, all the servants were already released. There are no servants around. Very hard to find some servants, if you like. Maybe there will be no servants. You can't have something dependent upon an action which might never happen. Now, I understand your point, Sam. You'll say, well, if there are no servants, then no. It's a positive. It's not a lack of. You've got to release servants at the point when the servants are released, then Jubilee year comes in as far as the land's concerned. If you can't do it, and it's great intentions, it's not good enough. So that's the view of Rabbi Yossi. Okay, it's important. Have a look at the Rashi as we go down the page. It says she'ef shala'olam below shiluach avodim. The earlier Rashis go through the psukim which I've already explained. She'ef shala'olam below shiluach avodim. Have you got that, Rashi? Beginning of the line is below. It's about 12 narrow lines down in Rashi. It's always possible, slim, but shalom below without sending a servant. Says Rashi, Pa'omim occasionally she'ein eved ivri b'Yisrael. Maybe there happens to be no eved ivri, she'yitain shaluach, who needs to be sent at the Yovel year. They've all been sent. As I say, it's something special that goes beyond the 6 years anyway, that a servant would want to stay longer. It may just happen there are none. Continues the next Rashi, it's impossible. Shelo yehei shofar motzui ba'olam, that you can't find a shofar anywhere. What, there's no ram, There's no one ram in the world. You can't find yourself a shofar. Okay, the fichoch. Now this is the logic behind Rabbi Yossi. Yesh lonu loima. You should say shetola hakosu, kushetola hakosu. When the posuk is making the Yovel year dependent upon something, lo tolo elabadova hamotsu, something which can always be done. As it can always be done, make sure you do it. And that's the only one, the shofar. Now, of course, this logic, of course, will apply to releasing the land as well. It may well be that even if you've sold land at the time of the Yovel, it's been sold on to maybe people from your own tribe. It may well be there's no land to go back to that particular tribe. It's possible, not saying probable, but possible. Whereas the shofar, it's impossible. There's got to be a ram somewhere that you can make yourself a shofar. Yeah. So therefore, that's the logic of Rabbi Yossi is, I know one out of these three, all these three are mitzvahs, one out of the three is crucial. The crucial one is therefore going to be the one where you know for sure you'll be able to do it, which means do it. You've turned the switch, and then you will have Yovel year. That is the view of Rabbi Yossi. The Gemara now gives another reason. Says the Gemara, Dova acher. Now I think this is your answer, Simon, that you gave. Zu masura lebezdin. Because when it says Vavata shofar teruah, Ta'viru shofar b'chol artzachem. Yes, the shofar should be sounded, but who are the people blowing the shofar? Masura lebezdin. V'zu eino masura lebezdin. Have a look at Rashi. Doba acher. Have you got it? Beginning of line is tekiyas shofar. The blowing of the shofar is masura lebezdin. It's up to the bezdin. Letzavos lishlucham. They are commanding their own shliach bezdin, whoever the shliach bezdin happens to be. It doesn't have to be the dayan himself. Maybe the dayan, if he wants to pick up the shofar, he can blow the shofar, but it's up to them. One of their shluchim will blow the shofar. V'shiluach avodim, sending away avodim. Yes, the bezdin can try and twist someone's arm, but at the end of the day, it will be up to the actual person, the individual, to release the servant, and it will be up to him to get out the land and return it back. Shofar is a much easier one. It's entirely dependent on the bezdin. They just have to blow the shofar. Fine. Have a look at Rashi. Masura leichidim is dependent, handed over to individuals. Vim yomoin, and if they refuse, if she, whoever the owner is, yavatel hayovel, it's in their hands. And therefore the logic is the Torah presumably would want to put this crucial mitzvah, hilkoch lo toloi hakosuv. The posuk would not have made it hang on toilin, on something which depended on the individuals. You'd expect the Torah to make this depend on the bezdin, who know they can actually do what's required of them. That is all the view of Rabbi Yossi, not the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Yes, Malcolm.
One more reason. I doesn't say
Yes.
it here. I mean, the word Yovel itself implies the shofar. Do they say that anywhere? Because
No, that's it's very good.
Yovel.
Yes, Bimshach Hayovel. Yeah, quite a very good point. Very good point. I think that's the way perhaps it's recognizable and noticeable. Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. You're saying the whole Yovel year itself seems to be linked to. That's very nice. The Gemara is here saying something a bit more than that, and saying, no, it's a very good point. Good point. Rabbi Yossi doesn't have to actually go to that point. He's got other things to say, but it's a good point. The whole Yovel year you're saying is Yovel. Yeah, Bimshach Yovel actually.
Or rather, the question I suppose is, do they discuss that anywhere? Or is it mentioned anywhere?
That's not. I haven't seen it. Good point. Please include it in your sefer when it comes out, and the next time you're writing something. But no, it's a good point. But it looks like they're looking at the words themselves. It may only be called the Yovel year because that's, I suppose, what you hear. You know, you're going to hear the shofar being blown everywhere, the Yovel year. But is that the crucial one? Yeah, I think we're learning from here that seems to the logic of why it's crucial is either because it's in the hands of the Bezdin to perform, or we know for sure it can be done. But you know, very good point. That the name itself sounds like that's crucial. However, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, because if we remember, first of all, the Gemara asks, why do we need a Dova Acher? I mean, there are two reasons. The first reason is good enough. What was the first reason? That it sounded like that then it might happen that there are no avodim. Says the Gemara, my Dova Acher, why do you need a Dova Acher? Because you could say, unless you say, there's got to be a servant somewhere, a servant. It's you know, as I say, it's not just slim, it's impossible almost. In case you were to say that there won't be a servant somewhere that needs to be freed. Do you remember the very first argument? The very first argument was that there might not be a servant to free. That's why it's the shofar. Says the Gemara, there's bound to be a servant. In case you were to say there's bound to be a servant, I've got another reason. Just in case you were to say that, I've got my second reason up my sleeve, which is that the shofar is handed over for the Bezdin to blow. That's the second reason. V'zu eina masura bebezdin. So
what's wrong with the second?
I'm sorry.
Why not bring the second reason? We're asking it one way around. We're saying, you got the first reason, what do I need the second reason for? Okay, well, the first reason may not apply. So bring the second reason, what do I need
Don't bother with it. It looks like the first reason is just don't ignore entirely that first reason. That's the point. It is a reason. You're saying you don't need it at all, Masura Lebezdin.
That's what the Gemara is saying. Well, that's a reason. Why do I need another one?
Yeah. You often find that type of idea, zu velo ein sorry. You know,
it seems that the Gemara puts more value on the first thing given normally.
Yes, you're right.
Therefore, if we can,
we'd like to accommodate that first reason. You're right. It's almost like, but just in case you were to say maybe not, I've got something else, but I quite like that first reason. But you're right. You'd have to focus. Why is that first reason that? I suppose the logic of that, you're trying to get across the logic, which maybe you could use in other cases. Often you do find that in the Gemara, where you like to put up an argument. It may actually not be 100% here, but it's a good, valid argument. Maybe you can use that somewhere else. So remember these arguments. I say they could be used some other time. Yes, Malcolm. Yes.
Sorry to come back. Is there a sense that that the idea of proclaiming liberty or sort of freeing the slaves is actually a desirable thing socially, let's say, or is that nothing to do with? Is that just too political? Is that too modern? No. The point is that if the aim is to get rid of slavery or servants, I don't know if that's the point of it, but you would say that it's not the aim.
No. Yes, I'm going to say
no. I mean,
it is the aim. It is the aim, but it's not the crucial out of the three. That's all. No,
but the point is, then it would be desirable to have actually the situation where there are no slaves. So if the second.
What you're suggesting very nicely. You're saying that the Gemara is saying it's possible there won't be any slaves, and the point we're getting across there is that's what we'd really like anyway. That's what you're saying. You're right. It is desirable.
Therefore, you need another. Therefore, that reason might apply. Actually,
that might. Just in case you came back and said it isn't. You're right. It's a good point. So, in other words, you're saying the logic of that first reason is very powerful, because we do want people to be able to set up on their own, not be dependent on others. And in fact, there's a very powerful point when you see what happens when these servants are freed. They are given a bit of a boost, a bit of a handout. They're given this boost. They're on their own now. They should be financially, on their own. We'll give you a bit of help to start off the business, as it were. But we want people not to be relying on others as much as possible. Yes, of course, there's a mitzvah stocker where people really need it. Absolutely. But we are trying to make people self-sufficient. That's absolutely crucial. I'm going back to the old Yeah, I'm just thinking of some of the old lectures that took place years ago when they were with the government here, where they were talking about, Charles will probably remember this. Certainly, my father was heavily involved in that with the government at the time. We were talking about self-sufficiency, and the idea was looking at the Jewish picture of trying to make people self-sufficient rather than relying on the state. There was a lot of tapping at the time, going back to Maggie's days, where if you remember they were talking about the state where relying on the state, and I think the paper that my father put out was that's very very nice. There should be handouts, but what we should really be aiming for is people to become self-sufficient, and that's exactly the point there, which I say at the time. I'm sure Charles remembers all that. The time of Maggie, etc. Anyway, so it's a very good point.
Large parts of Al Kahila that could learn that lesson.
Yes. Yeah, good point. So far we've.
I remember
I'm sorry,
that
Charles.
your father-in-law got into a lot of trouble with his paper.
Indeed,
there
yes.
Were many people on the left who did not agree with his approach.
Yeah, absolutely. It particularly came out because if you remember, the clergy on the other side were actually arguing that it should be the state helping people. But no, that was his view that we found throughout, and I think that's a very good example we find here as well. We do want the servants to be freed, give them a boost, and give them an opportunity to be able to be self-sufficient. Yeah, help them with the business.
Taking a political view, I remember
the state could be helping them.
Sorry, one at a time, yeah.
I remember your father-in-law's article in the Sunday Times.
Yes,
it was excellent. The other famous misquote of the time is Lahavdil, Mrs. Thatcher was when she said there's no such thing as society, was a misquote. People thought that it's dog eat dog. What she actually said is society is your next door neighbours. So there isn't a separate entity that can hand out money as known as society. It's everybody. We're all in it together, effectively.
Yeah, very good, very good. Yes, absolutely. Yes, very good indeed. So we're now back to our Gemara.
Norman, 1 second. Going back to the issue of servants.
Can't hear you so well, Charles.
No, I was going to say as regards servants or the possible non-existence of servants.
Yes.
Gemara was looking forward to a time like today, when, halachically speaking, there are no such things as Jewish servants.
However, it's still possible to be a servant, but what we're saying here is we were trying to move away from having servants. Absolutely.
But
moving
today,
away.
There is no such thing as a Jewish servant.
No, you don't find Jewish servants. Quite right.
What's an Evedivri? What's an Evedivri? Is an Evedivri a Jewish servant?
You could have an Evedivri. I mean, I don't know if they're. I think what Charles is saying is you don't find an Evedivri nowadays. But yes, it's on the statute books. You could have an Evedivri. You could have.
Yes, but the Evedivri is a halachically defined term with special conditions applying.
Yes.
And go to the land of Israel, go anywhere, those terms and conditions don't apply to any, quote, Jewish servants.
No, absolutely not. But for example, if we had the situation, yeah.
And that is why we moved to a different criterion. We're saying forget the servants issue, because the time will come like today.
There might not be any servants, yes.
There are not any servants.
Yes, very good. So you're saying that, yeah, and I think that's what Malcolm was saying too. We're moving towards no servants, and therefore it's a very powerful argument. Maybe there will be no servants. However, it still is on the statute books. For example, if someone, a thief, who does not have money to repay, we will tell him, I'm terribly sorry. You can't just say, I'm sorry, I haven't got the money, I'm not paying up. We'll say, and you'll have to end up being a servant to make up that money to ensure that you will be able to repay the theft. So it still is on the statute books.
It's on the statute
Hopefully it
books,
shouldn't
but
happen.
today in Israel, neither the Best Din nor the secular
No,
courts
no,
have any such power to
no, they haven't got the
make
power.
an order
Absolutely
to
not.
that effect.
No, we haven't got. That's true. There isn't. The power's not there. But I mean, it's still there. The message is certainly there. The people should be able to pay for themselves. That's what we're saying here. But yeah, you're quite right. Yes. So this, however, will answer the view of Rabbi Yossi. But what we haven't done is, what about the view of Rabbi Yehuda? Bishlomo Rabbi Yossi, that's all very well according to Rabbi Yossi, could the Ka'oma, as we've just said, Talmud his reasoning. Elol Rabbi Yehuda, but according to Rabbi Yehuda, what did Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda said exactly that it is the servants. Ma Tama, what's his reason? And here we have a technical reason. Yeah? A bit of smiley going on there. It's good stuff. Yeah, obviously enjoying the share. Ma Tama, what is the reason? What is the reason that Rabbi Yehuda says that it's the servants which is the crucial one? We've mentioned Rabbi Yossi, who says it's the shofar blowing. Why should it? They put up some very good arguments. What is the view of Rabbi Yehuda, or more importantly, what is the basis of the view of Rabbi Yehuda that it's the servants, which is number 2 on the list, is the crucial one? You have to release servants for the Kedushas Yovel to come in. Omacron, and he's got a technical reason why number 2, hello? I've got a...
In that
Mervyn, got a question there? Oh, right, okay. Oh, just ordering supper, that's fine. Okay. Omacron, says the Posuk, Omacron. Have you got that Matama, beginning of line Omacron? Let's go back to the Posuk. As I mentioned before, there's a first Posuk. The first Posuk says, blow the shofar. The next Posuk says, you're going to call it, now the next bit I've got in the Gemara, will karosem dera, freedom. Freedom for the servants. Uksova, then you have those words, yovel he, it is crucial. Then you have about the land going back to the original owner. Says the Rabbi Yehuda, I'm not interested in logic. I've got a very good technical reason why the point number 2 that's mentioned in the Pesukim is the crucial one. You know why? Mikro nidrash lefonov. If you've got a Posuk, and immediately following that Posuk, it says, this is crucial. What does this mean? Says Rabbi Yehuda, it's going to be talking about the item we've just mentioned. That's what it means. The Posuk is learnt, lefonov, immediately to the case that precedes it. I've mentioned shofar. Then I mention freedom of slaves. Then the Posuk says, yovel he, it's crucial. Well, what's it going on? It's going what's just been mentioned. Mikro nidrash lefonov, v'loy lifnei fonov, and not to the case before the immediate case. It's not going to go up to the shofar. You with me? I know one of them is crucial, and the one that's just been mentioned must be the crucial one. You have the same in English. The following are the 3 rules that are going to apply to yovel. Number 1. Number 2, and this is very crucial. And then it goes on to mention something else. So that this is very crucial, going back on the previous one. And in fact, in my Gemara, there are some texts which says, and it's not going on the case which is coming, it goes back on the previous case. So logically, if you're mentioning something, you mention A, B, and then you say, and that's absolutely crucial, it must be talking about that second case. Okay, so that's why it goes back. Have a look at Rashi on this. Mikro nidrash lefonov. Actually, the previous Rashi is important. Omakro, the Posuk says across him deror. Have you got it? Omakro. you should call freedom. The Somichlin, immediately afterwards, you've got Yovel, it is Yovel. Mikra Nidrash Lafonov, the Posuk, this is crucial, goes back, is a miut. It's a limiting word. Dehi akrias. It goes back on what's just been mentioned in the Posuk. Again, akrias duror koi dusolik mine, which means it's moving onwards and upwards from that. I've mentioned item number 2, and I say, and that's the crucial mitzvah. The lo atkir shofar, you can't be going back to tkir shofar, which is mentioned prior to the immediate case. You with me? It would be very strange to say this is crucial. It doesn't mean what you've just mentioned. It means the case before that. So now Rabbi Yehuda's view is that from the posuk itself, I can see that it would be the second mitzvah which is important. And this limiting word doesn't go on the mitzvah that's going to be mentioned either. It goes back to what has just been mentioned. Let's just move on a little bit here. The Kula Alma, says the Gemara, whichever way you look, Deror Loshen Cherus. This word Deror is a Loshen of freedom. Says the Gemara, my mashma, how do you conceive the word Deror that it means this freedom that we're talking about? Dasanya, I'll tell you why. I've got a brisa. Ein Deror Eshen Loshen Cherus. I know we've been translating it as freedom all the time, but the Gemara is going to explain why. Deror means freedom. If you look at the word deror, I know we've explained it before, but it's an interesting word. Dalad, Reish, Vov, Reish. Where do you see freedom in that? Omar Rabbi Yehuda, continue the Gemara. My Loshen Deror, you know what it means, Loshen Deror? Kimadaye Bei Daira. If you look carefully at that word, you can see the root is from dira, yeah, a place where you live. And the word deror means, with a resh at the end, you can live dira, you can have a dira where you like. You're not dependent any longer on the master because you are free. And that's how, because all you've got, you see, if you look at the posuk, it just says, Ukrosem deror ba'oretz l'chol yoshveha. You should call deror for all the inhabitants. I'm not quite sure what this word deror means, says the Gemara. I know we've taken for granted it means freedom. Where do you see that? So Rabbi Yehuda has explained it. The word deror has got the word dira with an extra resh saying you can make your dira wherever you like, which means the servants are now free. They can go and live, as I say, wherever they like. Not only that, and this very powerful message, interesting point there. You can go and sell. You can set up a business wherever you like as well. So that's an additional point about the freedom that we said before, the self-sufficiency, which means you are free, and not just free to enjoy the countryside, you're free to be able to set up business now because you are on your own, free to live wherever you like, and free to set up that business where the income will go to you rather than the master. Okay, let's just move on a little bit because there is a third view. Omar Rab Chia ba Abba Omar Rab Yechanan. Rab Chia ba Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Zu Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi. We've had two views. Rabbi Yehuda, remember the view, the crucial one out of the three was servants. According to Rabbi Yossi, the crucial one was the blowing the shofar. Avul chachomim omrim shloshton ma'aklos. If you see next to the word shloshton, you've got a little aleph. The aleph takes me up to the top corner where you find quoted in the Rambam, this is how we paskin. Generally, you'd expect to follow the majority view, which is this: all three are crucial. What does that mean? How can you, especially this text, I've got the word he here. No. It, although it says the word it, Kosovri, the rabbis are of the opinion, Mikra Nidrash Lafonov, when it says it is crucial, it means A, it is crucial, B is crucial, and C is crucial. So the posuk is learnt immediately to the mitzvah preceding it, lifnei fonov, to the mitzvah preceding that, and the mitzvah ala achrov. Wow, so this word he is saying that they're all crucial. He is just telling me, don't just think it's an additional mitzvah, but he means it. Each one of these in their own merits is crucial and needs to be done.
But then you have the same. Then you have the same objection in relation to avadim that we had when avadim were on their own.
I'm sorry?
The same objection that was raised in relation to avadim not being released applies here, because if one of the conditions is that there should be the setting free of avadim, if there are no avadim, you can't set them. So the same problem arises here.
Absolutely. If there are no servants to release, but
then one of the three has not been mekuyam, and therefore you don't have the yovel.
But you could ask your question on Rabbi Yehuda himself. Rabbi Yehuda said it depends on the servants being freed. Right. Rabbi Yehuda says, I agree with you. Logically, there's a point here. There's a problem. If there are no servants are free, but our hands are tied, because you look at the psukim and I see the word he is telling me it's he tells limiting, which means it's crucial, not just an extra mitzvah. So you are quite right. If it were to happen, there are no servants to be freed, then the yovel would not apply. You're right. Although we did say before, it's very, very unlikely. Although if you look at today we don't have servants. But according to this, yes, you'd have to release servants. However, it's a good point that you've raised, because I think the Sfas Emes raises your point. Ubaloshon HaGemara. Listen how the Sfas Emes answers your question. I pushed you a little bit, but I'll tell you what the Sfas Emes says. You may prefer this. The way the Chachomim are learning is the following. When there are no servants, and this, I think you said that right at the beginning, although I did push you a little bit. When there are no servants to release, it can't be crucial to release avodim if there are none. What it means is this: if there are servants to release, make sure somebody's released a servant, otherwise this mitzvah is not going to come in. You with me? So the logic here is going to be, it depends whether or not there are any avodim to release. If there are no avodim to release, you can't say, held hostage, as it were. There are no servants. What am I meant to do? A shofar, you can always have a shofar, but there might not be any servants. This view is holding that no, if there are no servants to release, then that's fine. But if there are servants to be released, make sure someone's released a servant, because if they haven't, then there'll be trouble. So that will answer your question perhaps in a better way, saying that this view is of the opinion that yes, when there's servants, do it. The shofar, blow the shofar, give back land. But if there are no servants to release, that will not be a problem. And that's the way this Sfas Emes is learning here. He said the following: Shloshton ma'akvois, the Sfas Emes. Mikol makom kshe'ein avodim lishloach ein hayovel bottle al yedei zeh. And he says, I found this in the words of the Raavad in Toras Kohanim on a Pirish. I found this in an earlier source too. So as we said before, and now we're actually qualifying that view, that what we're saying is that when there are servants, make sure someone's done it, otherwise you've fallen foul of the rule. But if there are no servants at all, that's not a problem. And that, of course, could be crucial today. If you say, as Charles mentioned, there are no servants at all, that will not wouldn't matter as far as keeping the mitzvah of yovel. Let's just see if we can finish this off. Says the Gemara, there's one other point. Says the Gemara, what about the word yovel itself? You don't need this. Remember, we said yovel was trying to increase. It's trying to include something. Have a look at the Gemara. Yovel, why do I need that extra word of yovel mentioned there anyway? I know it's a Jubilee year, but why say yovel? It is the yovel year. Says the Gemara, that's coming to include something else. Ta'afilu b'chutz la'aretz. The same rule would apply. It's a yovel. It's that extra word is increasing the mitzvah. Yeah, increasing the mitzvah to say. Have a look at Rashi. V'oksiv yovel. I've got that extra word, yovel l'rabos, which sounds like it's increasing the mitzvah. Yovel mikol makom. Yes, this word yovel that's in there in the Torah, it's increasing the mitzvah. It doesn't only apply to Eretz Yisrael, it applies in Chutz La'aretz too. If people had servants, clearly the land of Israel is only the land of Israel, but servants could be applicable in Chutz La'aretz too. Says the Gemara, just 1 minute. You can't do that because the Pasuk says when it comes to servants, Ukrosem dero bo'oretz. Don't tell me yovel. The word yovel, that extra word unnecessary, or so it seems, is including the mitzvah in Chutz La'aretz that servants should be freed. The Pasuk says dero bo'oretz l'chol yoshveha. Concludes the Gemara. That word ba'oretz is teaching us something else. Bizman shenoyeg dro ba'oretz, when it's applicable in Eretz Yisrael, noyeg b'chutz la'aretz. That's when it's applicable in chutz la'aretz. Bizman she'eino noyeg ba'oretz, if it's not applicable in Eretz Yisrael, in other words, it's saying it's dependent upon Eretz Yisrael, eino noyeg b'chutz la'aretz. So what we're saying is this: we have these mitzvahs. When it's happening in Eretz Yisrael and servants are being released in Eretz Yisrael, the same mitzvah will apply in Chutz La'aretz. If it's not happening in Eretz Yisrael, that mitzvah will not be extended over to Chutz La'aretz. You often find this, like the epicenter, the central point is Eretz Yisrael. Everything like the ripple effect all coming from Eretz Yisrael. When the mitzvahs are performed in Eretz Yisrael, then it will extend outwards into Chutz La'aretz too.
Which mitzvahs would they be? I mean, Tkir Shofar, presumably. Shemitah?
No. What it means clearly here is it's the servants. We're talking about the servants. If there's no release of servants in Eretz Yisrael, you can see, look at the Lashon of the Gemara.
All the mitzvahs.
Have a look at the Gemara. Bisman shenoyeg dror. Remember, that was freedom of servants. When freedom of servants is happening in Eretz Yisrael, noyeg b'chutz la'aretz. Bisman she'eino noyeg ba'aretz, eino noyeg b'chutz la'aretz. Then it's not applicable. And so it's clearly that mitzvah is the one we're looking at. And as we pass them like the Chachamim, we're saying all of them are important, all of them are crucial, and the mitzvah, though, will not apply in Chutz La'aretz unless it's applying in Eretz Yisrael too. That's a release of servants. Mark, you got a quick question?
This question of the Gemara that Yovel is miyuta, it's not, because it's giving a description of what the year is. It's giving a koteret to the year. It doesn't mention. It's the only time I mention the word Yovel in that pasuk. It says cross them to the actual word Yovel. So
no.
In fact, Rashi says on the pasuk that it's giving it. That's the name. That's the name of the year. It's giving.
Yeah, but what does it mean? It's giving it. No, I'll tell you why. Because I'll read the pasuk. It says ukrosem dorober yovel hi tiyelochem. Fine. V'shavtem ishel achuzasai v'ishal mishpachto teshuvu. Next pasuk. Yovel hi shenasa chavim shim shona. Yeah, you do have the words yovel is mentioned more than once.
Okay,
well, you don't need that.
I mentioned that pasuk. Okay, fine.
Oh, you're right. In that pasuk, no, but you don't need it. You don't need the word. It's mentioned elsewhere. If you just want to give it, as you see, you're quite right. Yovel hi, you're right. That's the name of the year, but you don't need it mentioned these couple of times. Why is it mentioned twice? Don't need it. So we seem to be learning from here that that's an inclusive word extending that mitzvah out. Charles had one question, or was there somebody else there? Charles, there was a question. Malcolm's got a quick question.
Okay, really quick. Just about I thought the release of the slaves was sort of dependent on the shofar. Do you remember it was about the 10th day they were only released after the shofar was
Yeah, you're right. It
Therefore, you
flows from
can't
there.
have one without the other.
No, no. What was it?
Sorry.
Yes, you can. Yes, you. That's just telling you the day. If you remember, those first 10 days, they're free and living at the expense of their master, and they're freed on that Yom Kippur. Now, it's true.
Yeah.
There are two separate things that are happening. It's true there will be a shofar. If the shofar is not blown according to this, that doesn't matter. You can still free the servants.
Right.
It's not one dependent upon the other, but they will both happen at the same time. That's true on the same day. Just one final question, Charles. You raised a question in writing. I've lost it. Have I got everybody here? Yeah, Charles was, yes, your question about Yom Kippur, we'll just conclude with that and we can spend another hour and a half on this subject. Your question which flowed from last week, yeah, where you were talking about, do you remember we had this point about the extra day? We talk about in Chutz La'aretz, Sveika D'Yoma, the extra day, and we spoke about Yom Kippur. And you said Yom Kippur being so close to Sukkot, it would be strange that Sukkot we're having an extra day and Yom Kippur we're not. I think that was, yes, the number of your question, Charles?
I was
yes.
making the point that the rabbis said we can't take into account Sefecha D'Yoma for Yom Kippur because we're only going to have one day. We can't have 2 days for Yom Kippur. So therefore we are overlooking this question of a possible second day, and we're saying that the 10th of Tishri is Yom Kippur. This really arises from what David Cohen raised last week in relation to Yom Kippur. And my question is, having fixed the 10th of Tishri as Yom Kippur, how is it that 5 days later, when we come to Sukkot, suddenly the rabbis reverse themselves and say, we're not certain whether Sukkot is on the 15th of Tishri or the 15th or the 16th. So there is in fact a contradiction.
Yes. So in answer to your question, in fact, the 15th and the 16th, and it is the 10th and the 11th. We are not fixing on that. We are saying the 10th and the 11th. However, it's the rabbis who have made 15 and 16, whether it's Pesach, whether it's Sukkot or Shavuos, and it's the 10th and 11th as well. However, it's the rabbis who've made this extra day. And what they've said is, we cannot allow people to fast 2 days. And if you look at the halacha, in other words, it's not, but we're going to have, we cannot ask the community to fast for 2 days. That's all. And therefore, this is very interesting. I'm looking here at the Shulchan Aruch, the last siman to do with Yom Kippur, which is in 624. He says the following: Yesh machmir, there are those who make 2 days Yom Kippur. He says, yes, Tezayin, he quotes here I'm looking at the Mishnah Berurah, Mishum Sveika D'Yoma. Wow. And they said they would say Slichus, etc. He says, however, continues the Shulchan Aruch, Va'ein linhoig b'chumra zu. It's true, there are 2 separate days and the rabbis instituted second days on all occasions. But they cannot allow a second day on Yom Kippur. Their hands are tied, mishum diyesh lochus sheyoved de sakona. It would be dangerous. And therefore they're saying, ein linhoig b'chumra zu. It's not that you're right. I say automatically, I suppose it will be the 10th is Yom Kippur. They're saying we would like to have an 11th. And we will have when it comes to Sukkot, there's nothing we can do about it because it will be a sakona. And if it's a sakona, you can't even fast Yom Kippur itself. There are a lot of people, sadly, who can't fast Yom Kippur because it's a sakona. We're saying exactly the same thing. The 11th is really a second day, but we are not going to treat it like that in this instance only because it's a sakona. But the ruling of a 2 days still comes in. So it's true. I mean, it's a bit of a contradiction. I agree with you. But it's the rabbis have their hands tied. They want an extra day because there's doubt. It's true. Imagine if you didn't have a calendar, you're doing it on your own, as we've heard plenty of stories of people doing that during the war, when they, with no calendars, working out a calendar, you've got 2 days. You're not sure, is it the 15th? Maybe the month before was an extra day in the month, and it's the 16th is really the 15th, if you see what I mean. They would like to do the same. In other words, the extra day is there because of a doubt, and it continued on, the rabbis continue that on, lest in sometime in the future there will still be a doubt. For some reason, we won't have a calendar, we won't know what's going on. We want people to keep 2 days, but when it comes to Yom Kippur, we can't do this because it will be dangerous, it will be a sakana, therefore they will stick to the strict letter, which is the 10th, just keep the 10th. But when we move back to Sukkot, where we have that extra flexibility, which means it's not a sakana, we would like to revert back to the 15th. People were not certain which day it was. And the reason, imagine in those days where really you did not know, if you lived, great distances from Eretz Yisrael, you would not know whether Yom Kippur really was the right day or not. The rabbi said, still, although you're not absolutely certain, we will tell you only keep the 10th. It's on our heads, as it were, because it's too dangerous to keep 2 days. In those days, there were people who were because they were unsure, they were keeping 2 days. The rabbis have said, now we don't want anybody to do it, it's dangerous. So what we're saying is we do, in every opportunity, we want to have that extra day because of the doubts, but on Yom Kippur, because it's a sakana, we will remove that extra chumrah of the doubt. We will go according to the majority of years. In fact, nowadays, of course, we have a calendar. We know exactly it's the 10th, and therefore it's been removed, as it were, and that chumrah shouldn't be kept. I hope that answers your question. It's not, I'm in a corner, as I say, but in other words, it's the rabbis would like to make the 11th day. They can't because of danger, and therefore they have no option. But in any other occasion, they would like to keep it on the books, and therefore when you get to the 15th, it's still there, 15th and 16th. So not ideal, but that's, I think the answer you can see from it is a Sveika D'Yoma. Certainly in the olden days, it would have been a real Sveika D'Yoma. People would be, finding out a few days later, or perhaps a couple of weeks later, which day Yom Kippur really was. And the vast majority of occasions, it would have just been on the 10th, because Elul, in fact, Elul today as well is just 29 days. And generally, Elul would have been 29 days. Okay, with that, gentlemen.